fire us up?
Yeah, we're ready when you are, Peter.
Okay, so I can start whenever, can I?
Yep, we press start.
Okay, well, we'll go then. Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Cabinet this afternoon. This is our second virtual Cabinet meeting, and so thank you for attending. Can I also take this opportunity to thank everybody in the organisation for the fantastic efforts you've continued to put in on behalf of the wider community. A fantastic and sterling job, and please, officers, can you take those messages back to your teams? And for those residents who may be watching this today or in the future, a big thank you for your support. We can't do any of what we've had to do without your continued support, and on behalf of Monmouthshire, a big thanks. Okay, so yeah, welcome to the meeting this afternoon. We have 4 main items on here, but first of all, I'll go through the agenda. Apologies for absence. We have none today as a full house. Are there any declarations of interest? If you could declare those verbally at this point, and then we will make sure the appropriate electronic pro forma comes through to you. Any? No? Okay, right, thank you. Okay, so introductions then. I should have done that earlier. So for those people who may be watching today, a big welcome to you. And I'm Peter Fox. I'm leader of the council. I'll invite my cabinet colleagues to introduce themselves. Could I start with Bob, please?
Hello, Bob Greenland, and I'm responsible for enterprise and land use planning.
Rich?
Richard John, Cabinet Member for Children, Young People and Mon Life.
Jane?
Councillor Jane Pratt, responsible for infrastructure and community services.
Penny?
Hi, Penny Jones. I'm Cabinet Member for Social Services, Social Care, Health and Safeguarding.
Sarah?
Hi, I'm County Councillor Sarah Jones, and I'm Cabinet Member for Social Justice and Community Development.
Paul?
Good afternoon. I'm Paul Jordan, Cabinet Member for Governance and Law.
And Phil?
Afternoon, Phil Murphy, Cabinet Member for Resources.
Thank you all. We're also joined by Councillor Dimitri Betruni, leader of the Labour Group, Councillor Francis Taylor, leader of the Independent Group, and Councillor Joe Watkins, leader of the Liberal Group. And I think we're also joined by Councillor Simon Howarth, a visiting member today, who will be raising a couple of questions. We're also joined by many officers. Welcome to you all as well. And perhaps if you are invited in to speak, you could introduce yourselves at that point. Okay, so can I remind members that when you're not speaking that you should be on mute, and you also should turn your cameras off, I'm told. Okay, so first of all, we'll go into the main agenda and starting at item 3, and that's bringing the first report forward by Councillor Richard John, and this is about increasing active travel opportunities. Councillor Richard John.
Thank you very much. So today I'm asking Cabinet to approve 2 strategic documents, our active travel consultation plan, which is attached to these documents at Appendix A, and our active travel strategic focus paper, which is amongst today's papers as Appendix B. Now, these documents will set in motion a consultation on the proposed active travel integrated network maps, and it's also a step forward towards developing an active travel strategy. Now, improving opportunities for active travel, mainly walking and cycling, is a key plank of this authority's corporate plan in terms of maximising the potential of our natural and built environment. Now, active travel was moved to my portfolio as part of Mon Life earlier this year, and I think moving it to sit alongside sport development and youth can help achieve a more holistic approach. It was previously with highways. Now, since January this year, we've appointed an active travel officer, Susan Hughes, who's been working with Paul Sullivan and the wider Mon Life team. Earlier this year, we submitted bids to Welsh Government for active travel funding, split across 14 different projects, totalling £2.5 million, with the aim of improving Monmouthshire's active travel infrastructure, both within and also between our main settlements of Abergavenny, Monmouth, Caldecott, Chepstow, Usk, Gilwan and Mega. The benefits of active travel are considerable in terms of improving mental and physical health, reducing obesity and the burden on our National Health Service, and also reducing traffic congestion and also air and noise pollution, which we recognise in parts of the county as significant issues. Together with our green infrastructure strategy and rights of way improvement plan and investment in our leisure centres, we've got a joined up approach to promoting opportunities for recreation, healthier lifestyles and improving well-being of the people in our county. In terms of financing, we're expecting Welsh Government to cover the costs of our consultation, although decisions on funding have been delayed. In recent years, Monmouthshire has received a really poor share of Welsh Government's active travel funding. The last 2 years, we've received just over 1% of the total amount of money that Welsh Government have distributed between the 22 councils. And I think that's particularly disappointing when you think about the additional challenges that we face as a large rural county. When you think you could fit somewhere like Cardiff geographically into Monmouthshire 5 or 6 times, and yet Cardiff last year had a fifth of the funding distributed to the 22 councils. When you think of those different challenges in connecting up the centres of population, between the challenges between Cardiff and Monmouthshire, I think we face far greater challenges here in terms of being able to travel from one community to another without your car, or perhaps without even cycling on a 60-mile-an-hour road. Those challenges that we have to overcome are really quite considerable. The timetable for the development of these integrated network maps has been extended due to the coronavirus outbreak. We're currently working to a deadline of September 2021. The consultation will focus not just on identifying individual routes, but also on the coherence of a joined up network across the county, and will consider things like shared spaces for public transport or cyclists. The coronavirus outbreak and the long-term impact is still unclear. We certainly anticipate growth in walking and cycling, as currently it's one of the only means people have of leaving their homes. Although there's obviously an element of doubt, as we're not sure what the long-term growth in car travel may be as a result of certainly an initial reluctance to perhaps use public transport. Although in Monmouthshire our public transport networks are limited, although we do recognise that where we do have existing routes, they are valuable lifelines, particularly for our rural communities. And you'll be aware of the famous number 65 bus, which travels through my own ward, and we do recognise how important those routes are. So today is a staging post towards developing an active travel strategy, and I look forward to taking any questions that members may have, and we look forward to greater engagement with members and the wider community in the coming weeks and months.
Well, thank you very much, Richard, and thanks for that comprehensive introduction. Active travel is something we've been looking at for a long time, but I think this whole current situation we lived through for several months has really heightened our need to focus even greater on it, and I know we'll be linking to some of that into the next report. So it's great we're going to be having this consultation. There's a lot of things we could actively be doing. Let's hope we do get the level of funding we really do need going forward. I have colleague cabinet members coming in now to ask questions. Can I invite Bob Greenland, please?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, as you quite rightly say, there's a lot of synergies between this report and the following report. And I just wanted to point out one thing, and it is in relation to the Appendix B that is with the report. And here it identifies where our priorities are in terms of where we're going to be working on this and in particular, the high priority and high to medium priority recognises that we must be looking at key employment sites. Now, I think we need to just identify that when they say key employment sites, they also mean town centres. That is inclusive of the term key employment site. It's because obviously it is important when we're considering active travel that town centres are a very important part of that. And I know I've spoken to officers, it does mean town centres as well, but I thought it's just worth pointing it out at this point.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Can I perhaps bring Jane in as well, Jane Pratt in as well, please?
Thank you very much, Leader. I just wanted to say that I really welcome this report and the opportunities it presents. And I would also like to mention that the Active Travel Officer, Susan Hughes, is making a very important contribution at our Climate Change Working Group, and that is also really welcome. So thank you very much. That was a brilliant appointment, and I think we're going to really see some fruit from this in the future.
Thank you, Jane. Richard, it was remiss of me actually, and I'm sure Susan must be on the line. Is there anything she would like to add at this point? No.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Councillor.
All right. Well, thanks, and thanks for all you're doing.
Thank you.
Okay, no more cabinet members coming in at the moment. I have two questions from Councillor Petruni and Councillor Taylor. Perhaps I can ask Dimitri if you would put your question, and I'll ask Francis to put hers, and then Richard can answer the two of them together then. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Peter. I'm sorry I'm late. It kept glitching. I knew I shouldn't have given Peter my Microsoft Surface. Questions on the question. There's two questions I have quickly. One is, I know it's a staging post, Councillor John, but what metrics will we be using to determine the most cost-effective routes to improve? Maybe we're not at that stage yet, but I was just kind of interested. I know it's kind of broad. I've been reading the paper. It's kind of broad aims, but I just want the kind of real metrics, cost benefit analysis ratios. Are we going to be doing that kind of stuff? So I'll be interested in that kind of area. And lastly, I know Bob clarified that these routes be going to town centres, but it does talk about employment sites. Are we just talking about within county? So for example, the south of the county, heavily reliant on Bristol, Cribbs Causeway. Are we also thinking about that as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Dimitri. Can I bring Francis in to ask her a question as well, please?
Thank you, Leader. The question was really that I did take part. There was a huge amount of work done around active travel in around, I want to say it was 2016. Community members were involved, action groups involved in putting forward their thoughts on the consultation and kind of creating maps. I agree with you, it's been incredibly disappointing to see us not being successful in key bids that we've been putting forward to Welsh Government for active travel. I just wonder really, and my question for Richard is, what do we think might be different this time? Because I think it's really difficult to go back to those groups and those key individuals who will have a view on this and ask them to contribute once more, which is what we want, when we've very little fruit to show from their participation last time. So I guess that was my concern really. Thank you.
Thanks, Francis. No, that's a really good point. So, Richard, can you pick up those three questions then, please? Okay, Rich.
Oh, I'm having some trouble unmuting.
Oh no, I can hear you. You're fine.
Oh right, okay. Sorry, it's my screen's telling me I'm still muted.
No, you're okay.
Right, okay. So I'll take Councillor Petruni's question first about the metrics. So the exact metrics haven't been finalised yet. Obviously, cost will be one, but we will obviously have to ensure that there are other significant metrics other than cost. So, for instance, I'm sure one of the key metrics we'll want to consider is what will achieve the highest level of shift in public travel habits. You know, we want to get the biggest bang for our buck. We want to enable people to take up the opportunities to walk and cycle that aren't there at the moment. Our ambitions will be based on the data, but also engagement with the public, with colleagues, community groups, and other specialists in transport. We've already submitted a bid to Welsh Government for, as I said, a number of projects, and I think those are the most detailed and ambitious bids that we have put forward for active travel funding to date. Obviously, we're still waiting for some response from Welsh Government to that, but certainly cost will not be the only consideration. Councillor Greenland was absolutely right in what he was saying, and that certainly is part of the answer to Councillor Petruni's second question about employment sites and town centres. You know, ensuring that our communities, our town centres are joined up is a key consideration. In terms of routes outside the county, obviously it's not for us to start building cycle paths in other counties, but we do recognise that some people do travel outside of our county for certainly for employment. So the route from Usk to Pontypool, we recognise that that's an important link. And we recognise how the south of the county there is a key arterial travel route running through the south of the county, and that's really important in terms of active travel. You know, the M4 and that arterial route needs to be mirrored in terms of, and the A48 as well. You need to be able to travel from one community to another without cycling on a 60-mile-an-hour road and mixing with fast-flowing cars and lorries. So ensuring that we have a key route along that corridor is really important. And you know, while we can't connect parts of Monmouthshire to Bristol, if we can connect up the different parts of Monmouthshire along that arterial route, then you are making it easier for people to travel from Mega to Newport or from Chepstow to Bristol. So you're absolutely right, that is a really key consideration, and active travel within the Welsh Government funding criteria is for what they describe as typical short trips, which obviously fits in with that. The focus within our network will also be on increasing access to key destination points, and that obviously will include train stations, which gives you then access to a far greater transport network. In terms of Francis Taylor's question, obviously what may or may not have happened in 2016 was before my time, but what I can tell you about the actions we've taken since this has been in my portfolio since earlier in 2020 is that we have a plan now for a detailed consultation, asking the public and others if they agree with our proposed focus for investment, both in terms of schools, employment areas, town centres, and transport hubs such as stations. And this will give us a clear steer in terms of seeking investment from Welsh Government. Mon Life colleagues have been collating evidence to build up comprehensive bids to Welsh Government, and I think critical links have already been established to ensure we've got synergy and a joined up approach with other areas of the council in terms of the local development plan, countryside rights of way, and the survey part of the consultation will also focus on primary and secondary education in terms of routes to schools. And we've already got very strong relationships between sport development and the youth service in Monlife and our education team. So I feel we've made strong progress since January, and we've got confidence in our team to continue to deliver this. But I recognise what Francis is saying about our reliance on the work of dedicated volunteers, and I appreciate the work that certainly Francis and Lisa Dimmock have been doing in the Mega and Undy area with the volunteers at Mega Station. And we are always reliant on the work of volunteers, and we hope to be able to tap into some of that expertise in this consultation.
Yeah, well, thank you, Richard. I'm hearing myself double for some reason. Okay, well, yeah, thanks, Rich, for covering those off. And yeah, can I share your thanks to certainly those people down in the Mega area who've been doing a lot to try and forward that active travel side of things, certainly linked to the walkway station. And we know that that's an ongoing area for them. So, members, if there's no other cabinet members to come in. I'm told that I can't be seen now, so I'm not sure if John, if that's the case or not. Okay, others can see me. That's okay. Sorry for those who may be watching in. We're still wrestling with the technology of running these meetings as smoothly as possible. Thank you all. That's great. Okay, so I'm going to move us then to the recommendation, and the recommendation into one of the report, and I'll read it out for those who might not have the papers, is that Cabinet approves the Active Travel Consultation Plan, which is at Appendix A, and the Active Travel Strategic Focus Paper at Appendix B. You'll see the voting boxes in the chat line. If you can, hopefully it'll work okay. If you can do that now, that would be great, please. And that's just Cabinet members. Two people yet to vote. I'm assuming you're having trouble with your button. Okay. So it looks like some of the votes aren't coming through. So if you've struggled, can you just type it into your chat bar, please? For or against. That's right. Okay. Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Thanks for that. Okay, so now we'll move on to the second report of the day, and that is unlocking Monmouthshire's town centres, and that's Councillor Bob Greenland.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you. Our town centres, as everyone will know, have been pretty sad places over these last few months, and we must now begin to look forward and see how we can reopen our town centres and get them back to business. Now, of course, we also know that it has not just been over this COVID period that town centres have been having problems. We know that our businesses in Monmouthshire have suffered from the trading from internet and also from our large out-of-town centres as well. And getting them back to business is not going to be simply a matter of opening the doors and letting people come in, because we are going to need to put some effort into this, not just us, but obviously the businesses as well. And we're looking now at the future, at how we can help get our town centres back into business. And actually, I think that we can envisage into the long term a better future for them. So what are we going to do? Well, I think there's a short term and a medium term and a long term approach that we need to make to this. In the short term, I think that the first thing that we've got to do is to ensure that the town centres are safe for people to come into. Unless we can ensure that people can come into a safe environment, they're not going to come. And so that means that we have got to look at, in particular, social distancing. How can our businesses operate and ensure that they are conforming with the social distancing rules? How are we going to deal with the numbers of people milling around our town centres? All of this needs a lot of planning, and we intend to make sure that when they do open, of course they're not open now, but when they do open, our visitors and our residents can be sure that they will be in a safe environment. So officers will be out there advising businesses and doing whatever we can to provide that safe environment. We have got to give people the confidence to come back into our town centres. And it's not only going to take a few lines on the pavement, but we are going to have to actively join with the businesses in marketing our town centres. So that is something which is coming up. Now, I also want to make mention of finance, because as we all know, this period under lockdown has been extremely costly for us and every other council. And so we haven't got a lot of money to play with. We need to get funding from wherever we can. And of course, Richard's just been talking about the active travel plan, and that is one area where we would certainly hope that we will be able to bring in finance to help us. There is another fund called the Sustainable Transport Measures in Response to COVID-19 Fund, which has been set up by the Welsh Government. And that was looking for expressions of interest to be in by the 21st of May. Now, if you look in your report, you will see a whole load of bullet points which the Welsh Government have produced. And quite clearly, some of those would not be relevant to Monmouthshire, but some will. So we have ahead of the 21st of May put in an application, an expression of interest to the Welsh Government, and we would hope to get money from that as well. Now, that then leads us on into the medium term, and we can envisage that to make our town centres safe, we will be looking at reducing the amount of traffic that passes through the town centres. Will we be able, for instance, to close streets off, to allow traders to come out into the streets, to be able to take advantage of the streets? Now, we know there are restrictions at the moment. We need to look at all of those and to see if we can safely allow traders more opportunities to be able to trade and to trade profitably. But all of this is going to be absolutely useless unless our residents, as I come back to the same point again, will feel confident and safe in coming into our town centres. So that's what we're about. But we're also about looking into the future. We're probably talking into next year now, but we're looking to envisage our town centres for the future. Can we make them not just somewhere where they will come and shop? And we have some amazing local businesses in Monmouthshire, which are our unique selling point, really, frankly. But we've also got an abundance of bars and pubs for people to come and spend their time. But can we now make our town centres destinations in themselves, so that people will come to meet each other, and goodness knows we all need to meet each other, in a safe and a pleasant environment. Quite different, I think, from what we've got at the moment. Now, to get there, we are going to need to look very much to the future. We need to talk to our stakeholders, talk to obviously the businesses, town councils, and anybody else who's got ideas of how we can now transform our town centres into a new environment for the future. So that's what this report is about. It's about how we get there from where we are now, and outlining the stages that we're about. It's the first of the reports, and I've no doubt that as we move forward, I will be bringing further reports back to Cabinet, which takes this vision further. And I think at the moment that's probably all I need to say. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, well, thanks, Bob. I really welcome this report. It starts that important journey back to some sort of normality, but also looks forward to the future and how we can, out of every difficult thing, opportunities arrive, and perhaps out of this terrible crisis we've been in, perhaps a new model will emerge in our communities and in our towns, and a new vibrancy done in a different way. And I think key for me is that, and it's highlighted right the way through the report, how we work closely with our businesses in shaping this as well, and obviously what the public want as well. It was silly to just do something which doesn't match what the public expectation is. So it is important that this is an all-encompassing plan, but those initial steps of how we make people feel safe to go back into our towns when we can, and enable those businesses to try to get back on the feet. And I just, at this point, can I thank you, Bob, and your team, and across the council for the fantastic support you've been putting into our businesses, getting money out of the doors so quickly to support those businesses. And we're thankful for UK Government and Welsh Government for the support packages that they put in place, and for the speed that our officers, and a big thanks to them, have managed to get that out to businesses. We know there's still further businesses to talk to, and we encourage them to step forward, and I know that's happening as we speak. But it's been a fantastic effort, and that's been mirrored across Wales, I know, but it's so fundamental. We have to get our economy back up on its feet, but we need to do that in a safe way, a way which gives our public the confidence, and I think you've paved the way to that through this report. I know you're supported with Kath Fallon today. Kath, is there anything you'd like to add at this point?
Thank you, Leader. Really just to say thank you also to our Monmouthshire Business Resilience Forum, who we're meeting on a weekly basis. That's with our local chambers of commerce and also our tourist associations that have been really vital in terms of pulling together this report, and we very much look forward to working with them in the future. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Kath. That was remiss of me not to mention that. I was sitting in on that resilience group, and fair play all the way through this pandemic. They've been meeting every Wednesday morning, doing a brilliant job in trying to help us all smooth the best way through all of this. So big thanks to them as well. Yeah, I've got Sarah Jones would like to come in. Sarah.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you very much for the report. I think it's extremely positive that we're taking this proactive approach to bringing this forward. I know it's already building a lot of the work that we've already, was in existence, because we've already seen that there's been challenges on our high street prior to COVID-19 happening. And we know that consumer behaviour is changing. We know that online shopping is very at the front of things at the moment, and that potentially will become more entrenched. So we clearly need to be ready to revitalise our high streets when it's safe to do so. And Councillor Green, I've just got three questions on the report, if that's okay. The first is around the Welsh Government's own roadmap was published a couple of weeks ago. One of the things that they have in there is around public realm adaptations, which I think this report does talk to, but I just wondered whether or not Welsh Government themselves had given you any indication as to what that might look like, particularly given we're supposed to be entering that phase right now. So that's just around that specific action within the Welsh Government roadmap. The second question I've got is just around any consideration for business improvement districts. I think they have a real place in some town centres, and they can have a huge success. It can be variable, but it's certainly something I think we should consider, and something that the Resilience Forum will no doubt be looking at. But just wondered whether you'd had any thoughts on that. And my final question is just around the UK government's very welcome announcement a couple of days ago that there would be £50 million to councils in England, which is going to go towards reopening high streets safely. It's a reopening high street safely fund. And I just wondered at this stage whether or not there'd been any indication that that Welsh Government fund will come forward through the consequential that will no doubt filter through to Wales.
Thanks, Sarah. Can I bring you back then, Bob?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Leader. Yeah, first of all, the public realm adaptations, and I guess that's what is covered in the bid that we've just put in for, and a lot of it is to do with active travel. It's to do with moving to cycling, cleaner spaces, all of that sort of stuff. And I think that the reasoning for, or from their public realm adaptations is just to make it cleaner places and better environments for us to move into. As far as bids are concerned, business improvement districts, I'll probably ask Francis to come in a minute, or perhaps Kath. But first of all, let me just say that we did try to put a business improvement district into Abergavenny a few years ago. Unfortunately, it was voted down by the businesses. I think that was a pity, but nevertheless, that doesn't mean to say that we can't take it on again. But perhaps either Kath or Francis can come in on that in a second. The third question you ask is about the £50 million reopening of high streets. That was a really good initiative that we heard coming in from Westminster Government. These things, there is a consequential payment that would undoubtedly come into Wales as a result of that announcement. It is up to the Welsh Government whether or not they distribute it in the same ways to local authorities as it has happened in England, but I certainly hope that that will be the case, because that money is desperately needed in our town centres. So perhaps I could ask Francis at this stage if she could come in on the bids in particular.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Bob. With regards to the bids in Wales, there aren't a large number of them across Wales at the moment, and there's 16 in total. One industrial, the rest are within towns. And one of the key things is for the businesses to come together themselves to look at pulling together a bid. Now, with the new shaped and formed Business Resilience Forum, that might be something that each of the business leaders and groups might be interested in taking forward and considering again. Welsh Government provide financial support to those bids in the order of around £30,000 to manage and support their running costs. And Welsh Government earlier on in the month announced additional support and funding and packages to support bids that are already in existence in Wales. So if there are groups within towns that would like to consider setting up a bid, I know that we would be more than happy to help and support them through that process and the funding process and application process they need to go through. It is something that can be beneficial for towns, and definitely one that we would encourage people to look at and consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. Okay, Bob, anything you want to add at this point? I've got a couple of questions from opposition leaders as well.
Yeah, no. Let's have the questions then.
So could I ask Dimitri to bring a question forward, and then I'll ask Francis Francis has got one as well. So Dimitri.
Yeah, thank you. First, I wish you good luck. Online shopping has moved from 1.4 trillion 5 years ago to 4.9 trillion and is set to double. So yeah, and 50 million is absolutely nothing in England. That will cover nothing. So it's a token. But I do wish you good luck in trying to make this a kind of cafe culture. I think you try to describe Monmouthshire as, because we need the weather, and so far we've got it. But in relation to COVID-19, the trend seems to be that people are driving far more. You can understand that it's safer. You're in your closed space. It's usually just you or someone in your household. for vulnerable people, particularly elderly people, that would be probably their preferred mode of transport for quite some time until a vaccine, I'm guessing, no one really knows. In what way could public transport help bring the town centres alive? Because all our town centres, or the majority of them, are frequented by the older generation who are more susceptible to this awful virus, and they largely rely on public transport. I'm just wondering how we get over that hurdle, like particular ideas about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Dimitri. Good question. Francis, can you put yours as well, please?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, am I?
Yeah, you're on. Yeah.
Yeah, so absolutely. I think I just want to echo the thanks to the teams that did get, as you say, have been doing an enormous amount of work with businesses and got that support out so quickly. I think it was very much appreciated. But I mean, my question is different to Dimitri's, and is very much in terms of, you know, how will the council work with Welsh Government to give confidence to businesses? Because I hear what Dimitri says, but you know, our high streets and shopping centres, like in Mega, I know Mega's not covered in particular in this report, are extremely valuable to local communities. I mean, we've already seen, as Sarah points out, challenges in our high streets pre-COVID. We've seen huge, you know, crippling business rates, for example, which have led some fantastic businesses closing. You know, I quoted Tiger Bella, I think, in Monmouth. And that actually, yes, okay, in the short term, perhaps people's confidence in public transport is not as it could be. But in the longer term, I think we have to think to the future. And so it is very much about that active travel agenda, I think, that we talked about in the first report. And it would be remiss of me not to mention, you know, how we work with Welsh Government to get them to take different approaches, like to make walkway stations, other active travel opportunities that may arise. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Francis. I'll invite Bob back in, but I think I'll also invite Jane Pratt in as well to give a further reflection on some of the transport, the actual transport issues as well. So, Bob, do you want to kick off?
Yes, absolutely. Let's not beat around the bush. We have an uphill task, as Dimitri has alluded to. Yes, of course, it's going to be difficult. But just look around the UK. There are some examples of some very successful towns that are bringing people in and that are doing exactly what we are intending to do here. So I don't underestimate the problem, but I am very confident that we have in Monmouthshire businesses which are locally owned, where people really are determined to make their businesses successful and make our town centres into something that we want to see going into the future. So we will be looking to do whatever we can to support our businesses moving forward to get to that vision. Public transport, I'm going to leave that to Jane, but I do also just want to point out that it's quite right. There are a lot of elderly people living in in Monmouthshire, and for them, at the moment, public transport is not an option. So we have to keep in mind that people need to get to our town centres by private transport. And when we are reimagining our town centres, we're not going to forget them. They are very, very important to the future of our town centres. As far as working with the Welsh Government is concerned, onto Francis's question, we are working closely with the Welsh Government over this, and we will continue to work as well. That having been said, she's mentioned the issues of rates, and I think that, well, when Mark Drakeford was in charge of that portfolio, I wrote to him on several times about the issue of rates and how it is crippling our town centres in particular. We had a recent revaluation, and it makes no sense to me at all that in Cardiff generally the rateable values went down, whereas in Monmouthshire they went up. That was a desktop exercise. It didn't work. It left us even in a worse position than we were. And frankly, I think that the rate system is broken. I think there has to be a new alternative system, and the Welsh government has the autonomy to be able to develop a new system, and I would very much urge them to do so into the future, so that we have an equal trading ground for our businesses in town centres against some of these large out-of-town businesses as well. But having said that, perhaps if Jane would like to come in more on the transport issue.
Yeah, no, thanks, Bob. Yeah, Jane, you're welcome in to perhaps pick up those couple of transport issues.
Yes, thank you very much, Leader, and thank you very much, Bob. I think that it's true to say that things are undoubtedly never going to be quite the same as they were before, and we have already mentioned the Welsh Government's Sustainable Transport Fund, and this scheme is intended to introduce practical measures in our streets and on transport to allow businesses more scope to trade and develop greater confidence amongst the public to return to our shops, but to walk, cycle or use public transport rather than simply reverting to the private car to get around. And I think the other thing worth noting is that during this crisis, I mean, I think many of us have questioned our work-life balance. We've looked at our lives and really had a think about what's important to us. And I think many people will decide that actually they're not going to travel every day of the week to the office in Bristol or Newport, and they're going to try and do some home working. And I think that will give them the opportunity to use local shops and to cycle and walk, all these good habits that they've actually been trying out whilst we've been in this situation recently. So we will certainly be working flat out with businesses, as Bob has said, to ensure that our town centres do return to the safe and vibrant, attractive destinations. And, you know, we will be certainly doing everything we can. Francis also mentioned Maker Station, and I want to address that point as well, because obviously we have been approached by Maker Station Group and yourself, Francis, to submit this application to the grant, and we haven't had support from Welsh Government for this Mega as a new station. I'm sure you're aware of that. We understand Welsh Government have chosen other ones. But irrespective of this, we really want to try hard to do everything we can, because Network Rail, GWR and TfW had spoken positively about the scheme. Irrespective of the lack of Welsh Government support, there are indications that the business case behind the station is strong. And the fund application is being prepared by Mott MacDonald Consultants, who've worked on the major group project previously, and is being jointly funded by the Mega Group and MCC. It's less than £10,000 in total, and I believe applications must be in early June. So we've heard that Jessica Morden is writing in support of the application, and she is also contacting David Davis, even though it's outside his constituency. But I will also certainly be speaking to David Davis to highlight this scheme, because, you know, we need to do everything we can to drive this forward. And I hope that gives Francis some confidence that we're not going to, you know, we're going to really try hard to make it happen.
Yeah. Thank you, Jane, and thanks for covering that off. And I note that Francis has put in the chat bar that she wanted to reiterate thanks for the support for Mega Station by the officers in the council. So I'll pass that message on now, Francis, to you. So thanks very much for that input, and we do wish things like Mega Station well. But let's come back to the recommendation in the floor. Sorry, Bob, do you want to come in and
yes, could I just come in very quickly? It was remiss of me as well not to thank the Business Resilience Group at the very start, and also our officers who are continuing to work on the grants and the schemes that the Welsh Government put out. We've got most of the money out through the door now. I've forgotten the figures. 19.9 million, I think, has been distributed throughout the county, and we've got some more still pending. And when new schemes come out, we'll be ready to deal with those as well. And then just one final thing. We will be looking at marketing and our message to our residents, and there's quite a lot of anecdotal evidence already that people are shopping locally again. They are looking to their independent shops once more, and we will be urging people to continue to do that. Shop local, shop Monmouthshire.
Thanks, Bob. It's a great strapline, that is, and I really hope that gets built on, because that would be great to see our Monmouthshire businesses really thriving. Oh, looks like I think somebody somehow my screen is being shared somehow. John, can you sort this out? There we go. Right. Okay, right. So we can carry on. So I'll take the recommendation now. The recommendation is 2-1, and we have the the vote box up in the chat line. We'll hope that will work, but I'll read the recommendation out for those who haven't got papers. So at 2-1, it says to endorse the outline plan as detailed in the report and the submission of an expression of interest to Welsh Government for funding to aid local sustainable transport measures in response to COVID-19. So all in favour of those, you'll see the voting mechanism there. If you can do that now, and if anybody struggles, please put it in the chat line. It seems we're still stuck on 6. That was the same with the last vote. So there's 2 people who are wrestling with this. So we have an additional 4 come in on the chat line. There's 1 person not managed to vote yet. Okay, now that's the full house. So that's 8. That's in full support, and that's carried. So thank you, Bob. Thank you for officers for the work you've done on that. Okay, I'm going to move us on to the next report now, and this is item 3C, and this is COVID-19 proposal to utilise Gilwern Outdoor Education Centre for homeless accommodation. Can I invite Sarah Jones, please?
Thank you, Leader. So the report that you have presented with you today, it's an opportunity for us to update on the current situation with regards to homelessness and the housing options in the county, as well as presenting you with a specific recommendation on utilising Gilwern Outdoor Education Centre as a very short-term contingency measure. This report is also asking for your support in terms of commissioning work to look at how we can manage the situation in the medium to long term, because quite clearly this is all about supporting people out of those temporary measures. So COVID-19 has created real challenges for work for some of our most vulnerable people in society, and quite clearly it's our duty to support them. It's not just a legal duty, it is a moral imperative on us as a council. Now, Welsh Government have issued new guidance since the start of the pandemic, and that stipulates we must safely house and support those that are displaced due to the current emergency. As a council, we remain our commitment to supporting those, preventing homelessness and maintaining that duty in that regard. So the paper sets out both the challenging and changing situation in terms of the impact on homelessness. Although there's actually been a small reduction in the number of actual new applications, we have seen a change in the profile of demand and indeed the reason for homelessness at present. For example, the sort of situations that have been presenting themselves might include family breakdown, sofa surfing, financial difficulties, all caused by the COVID pandemic. Now, we should highlight the number of positive outcomes because there have been positive outcomes for those individuals, despite the challenging and complex situation. We have secured an additional 56 accommodation units over the last 8 weeks, and these are units in both rural and urban areas. And we've been working really well with both the individuals themselves that have been displaced or who are homeless, as well as with the wider community. I am, as a Cabinet member, really proud of the tireless work that the team has taken in this regard. We cannot underestimate the pressures on that team in terms of having to both undertake visits in the current climate, but also in terms of having to try and build those strong relationships with new accommodation providers. And there has been real success in that regard. And let's not forget that we had a number of pressures already in this area due to the flooding that took place earlier this year. So there's been great pressure overall. However, as I've highlighted, despite the good work that the team has put in on this issue, there continues to be a risk that we won't be able to meet the accommodation needs and demand if the current trends continue. And I say if the trends continue. I must reiterate that our officers are doing all that they can to source out suitable accommodation. We're working with Welsh Government, for example, also with Rent Smart Wales. We're working with tourism providers. We are proactively seeking out accommodation as and when we can. But we have to consider all options as a contingency. Last resort measures are now needed due to the pressures that we are facing. So subsequently, this brings us on to the recommendation today to use Gilwern Outdoor Education Centre as a potential temporary solution. Whilst the centre may not be a long-term provision or suitable for long-term provision, as a short-term measure, it is a vacant building which lends itself well to this type of accommodation. The site is in our ownership, it can be prepared quickly, and it allows those individuals most in need to have a dedicated space. It will be for our Monmouthshire citizens who have become homeless due to the current crisis and who we have a very clear duty of care to protect and to support. Now, if approved, the centre would become under the management of the Housing Options team, and support would be provided as has been outlined in section 3.11 of the report. Given the services that we will be providing on site, we do not envisage a need for individuals to leave the site itself, but quite clearly they're free to comply with the prevailing government guidance in terms of travel. We don't currently have anyone waiting to use this site, but if, and I stress if, it is to be used, it's likely the accommodation would be in small numbers, although there is a maximum capacity of 9. It would be for short periods of time, and the process would of course be managed very sensitively. It's highly unlikely we will see capacity from day one, if at all. So the proposed use, and I want to make sure that I reiterate this again, it will cease on the 21st of August. It is a temporary contingency measure. The planning requirements allow for us to undertake this measure, and that's detailed in the report under part 3.13 and 3.14. The report outlines the resource implications and talks of security, and I want to be very clear on this point, and I want to allay fears here about any misconception about what security might mean, and to note that the decision to appoint security is purely a precautionary measure. It's there in the knowledge also that the staffing capacity here has been impacted because of the situation. Now, I've been on site and I've met those people that would be offering that service, and they are fantastic and very welcoming individuals. They would be brought in to support the people in that centre who will be housed there, and they also will provide a really important link to the wider community should they have any concerns. Now, this is working and is operational on other sites that we have across the county, and it's proved to be really successful, for example, in the hostel that we have, the night shelter and the shared accommodation in Chepstow. These security officers, they have a really humanistic and supportive approach, and that's really made those residents feel secure within the household and the area in which they've been placed. They are friendly, they are approachable, and they've developed really positive, trusting relationships with those residents who are most in need. They've also developed very positive relationships with the neighbours and with that wider community. They offer reassurance and they're a point of contact in terms of if any issues do indeed arise. Again, this approach has been widely welcomed and embraced by the community in the other areas where it is already happening. We're keen to replicate that at the Outdoor Education Centre. Now, I want to just highlight on some of the concerns and communications that we've received, and I do want to note that it was regrettable that this report came out before the letters to the neighbours were issued, and I just would like to offer an apology in that regard. Now, I do understand some of those concerns, and I know our officers have been working really hard to respond to them, and I'd like to say thank you to Councillor Pratt as well, because she's been highlighting those to me and raising those issues on behalf of her residents. Now, in responding to some of those, I just want to say it's important to note that this is a temporary measure. The support and services that these individuals will have on site, which is outlined in this report, I hope will offer some degree of comfort in allaying any concerns that are coming forward. We're going to have a comprehensive support package in place for each individual. This has happened right across all our bed and breakfast and temporary accommodation. So each individual that would be located here would be allocated a support worker from within our own tenancy support service, and that's currently with Pobl and Llamine. The options appraisal that we have attached to the report also sets out how the situation is going to be reviewed on a daily basis. So it's going to be constantly monitored should it be approved today, and should we even indeed need to use the site. There's been some concerns about the virus itself and in terms of potentially introduction of virus into the community area. And just to again allay some fears, to the knowledge, the council has not had any awareness of any current clients that have had the virus or indeed have the virus at present. We've not had any cases amongst those that have been placed within the 56 new accommodation units. The council's focus, as per the requirements of Welsh Government, is to protect these people from the virus. It's our duty to protect them as well from actually being exposed to the virus. This site actually allows individuals to self-isolate if indeed they do become ill. And just sort of summing up, I want to just touch on the medium to long term, as clearly there's a recommendation in the report on this. We will be bringing a paper back to July on those options. We appreciate that many of these areas are temporary measures, and we need to be looking at the medium to long term to support these residents into permanent housing options. And finally, Leader, I think it's really important to emphasise why we are considering using this site. It is to protect our most vulnerable individuals at a time of crisis. These individuals did not choose to be in this position. They are displaced from a pandemic that is out of both ours and their control. It could be any of us in this position. It could be our children, family or friends. And we need to show that duty of care and compassion that I believe that we all should be showing. Whilst we will do all we can to protect lives and stay safe, it must be extended to everyone in society. And I believe that the Outdoor Education Centre provides us with the option to do just that. As I say, and just in my final remarks, it is a temporary contingency measure which meets our legal responsibility, but much more importantly that it meets our moral duty to help those most in need. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for taking the time to walk us through that. And I'm certainly aware of the level of concern locally. I've received copies of various emails, and I understand where some of our community is coming from, as you did, and I'm pleased you managed to hopefully help people understand how this is a contingency measure. But the thing for me is that any one of us could find ourselves as a homeless person as a result of the pandemic, because it is homeless people who are in that situation because of the pandemic. We could fall into a heck of a lot of problems at this time. There are people with financial problems, relationship problems, especially through some of the things which are, which people are having to cope with, being locked up for so long. So, I think of myself or my children as being probably, could be one of those homeless people. And it's important we don't stereotype individuals who find themselves in this unfortunate position. But again, that doesn't take away from the concerns from local people, and I know our the local member there, Jane, and both and Simon have some concerns, and I will be inviting them in a second. So can I then bring? I've got I think I'll bring Jane in first as a local member, and then I'll be coming back to Bob Greenland and Penny Jones. Jane.
Thank you very much, Leader. And obviously everyone that is homeless has the right to be given safe harbour, and everyone has the right to have a home to call their own. And as we've said, people have become homeless for many reasons. And, especially at this difficult time, people may fall out with family or people they're living with and find themselves on the street with nowhere to go. They may also have suffered abuse, post-traumatic stress disorder, or have dependency issues caused by these experiences. On the Crisis Charity website, they state that homeless people should ideally have a COVID care plan in place, and they should be provided with PPE equipment. This report makes no reference to either. I would like to have confirmation from the officer that people being offered accommodation at this facility will be tested, and only those who test negative will be offered accommodation. They will also need an appropriate COVID-19 care plan. I'm very concerned that if this is not the case, these residents will have the freedom to access the local area and potentially spread the disease. Can the officer confirm that this will be the case? It is vital that the local population are not put at risk by anyone moving into this facility that could introduce the virus into the community. Anyone leaving hospital and returning to the community now has a test, and this should be the case here too. So can we confirm that every person offered accommodation here will be tested, that the accommodation offer will depend on a negative result? I understand that tests are now able to be turned around within a day, and that they will have a COVID-19 care plan in place to safeguard them and the community's safety, and that they will provide it with PPE. The residents will be sharing communal areas on site, such as the kitchen, so this is vital to protect other residents, the staff at the centre and the local community from infection. In 3.7 in the report, point 7, we highlight that accommodation for homeless people is dispersed across the county, including in rural areas, which we accept the officer says further impacts on day-to-day management. What does the officer mean by that? And under 5.1, we do state that the rural location is not ideal for homeless people due to the distance from town facilities. This is my second concern. This does not provide accommodation in the right location for homeless people. It is a rural location with an infrequent bus service. There are currently no medical facilities in the village, and the residents will have to travel to meet family and friends when that is allowed, and access services. If there are any problems, the police often have to respond from as far away as Monmouth. This is far from ideal, and it would have been much better if out of the many empty properties across the county, we could have set this temporary accommodation up in an urban location. Last Friday, when I visited the centre, the officer commented that he feared no one would accept this accommodation, so even he accepts it is not a suitable location, and this is also confirmed in the report under 5.1. I am, however, very encouraged this week that officers are making further inquiries and asking communities across the county if they know of suitable accommodation that may be available for homeless people by contacting community councils and groups and advertising on social media for alternatives. I really hope this delivers some better options for our homeless people in a location that has better transport links, access to services, and in an urban location, not on the edge of a village. The accommodation itself is designed for school children on an outdoor education holiday. The rooms are small and are not suitable for families, so that will further limit its use. It would have been preferable if the accommodation chosen was more flexible to accommodate singles, couples and families, not just single people. And this facility can only be used up to August the 21st, so it provides a very temporary solution, and on that date other accommodation will have to be sourced for the residents. The accommodation will have to be deep cleaned, and I cannot see a figure for this, as I would consider the sum of £1,000 for repairs to be inadequate. What will the deep cleaning costs be? Anyone taking this accommodation will have the added stress of not being able to settle, as it will be a very temporary solution until this date when they will have to move elsewhere. Whilst there is a figure of 68,000 given for on-site security, this money would be better spent offering support, counselling and guidance to get the homeless people a long-term solution to their problems and get their lives back on track. This needs to be tailored to the individual, as the reasons for homelessness are varied and complex. This report was hastily put together, released on a Friday, and despite stating that the residents had been informed, this was not the case. When I asked on the following Monday morning on my regular update with my senior officers if residents had been informed, I was told they had been. In fact, I later discovered that this was not the case, as they did not receive their letters until the Wednesday. It is my opinion that the residents should have been consulted. It's my opinion that the residents should have been consulted and given adequate notice of the council's plans so that their views could be taken into account. I can totally understand the anger from nearby residents who live feet away from the entrance when they read this report. It is hardly surprising that they are concerned about their family's safety when they read about £68,000 being spent on security. I have 3 children now grown up of my own, and without adequate consultation and explanation, it is understandable that they feel let down by the council over these plans. The report does make reference in 5.1 to the residents, stating that there may be concerns, and officers must have realised that it was likely to be a contentious issue, but still pressed ahead without making adequate arrangements for the residents to be consulted. The execution of this report was far from how it should have been. As the independent group point out, there is no guarantee that the council will be paid the total sum for this temporary use of Gilwan Outdoor Education Centre. And even if it is paid for by Welsh Government funds, this is public money, and I think it does not provide value for money. I want to see better medium to long-term solutions for our homeless people, and this will go no way to providing that. So whilst I will be supporting 3 out of the 4 recommendations, I cannot support 2.2, as I believe this is a facility in the wrong place that will not provide suitable accommodation for the homeless people of Monmouthshire for the reasons I have given. The consultation was ill thought out and I was misled, and the local residents were not consulted. For these reasons, I cannot support the recommendation in 2.2. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Jane. And I know Sarah is very aware of your concerns, and I know tried to cover a lot of those concerns in her opening introduction, certainly around some of the misconceptions really about things like security. I think, and I understand when you read through the report, why you could create a picture in your mind, and I think with hindsight, perhaps things could have been written slightly different. But it's important for us to move at pace in this time through this whole emergency situation, and you know, with hindsight, everybody could do things better. We recognise that, but I have nothing but praise for our staff in our organisation from all quarters for what they've done so quickly and sensitively across the county. However, I still am reassured that you know, this is a contingency. I know we have to talk as if it's definitely happening, but because we have to plan accordingly. But it's a contingency. We don't even know who these people are. They haven't even presented yet. So Sarah, I know you probably would want to talk to some of that, perhaps more of Jane's, and then I know I've got 3 more cabinet members would like to come in. Would you like me to take some of their points first, or would you like to respond now?
I'll respond now if you don't mind, just because there's a few points there. And if you don't mind, Leader, I'll probably bring in a couple of our officers. I know Mark, Ian and Jane, who've been very much involved in this, would be very helpful on that point. Please, so just in terms of you know, the safety and security of the individuals themselves and around the COVID care plan and PPE. I might ask Mark to come in on that point once I finish responding to the others. But just in terms of the safety of the individual themselves, they will each have their individual support officer. There'll be an individual support worker, and that's through our tenancy support service that we've already got in place with Pobble and Clymai. So, you know, an allocated support worker will help them in terms of supporting their needs on site. In terms of it being a rural location, yes, but we have 56 new units right across the county, and many of those are in quite rural areas, particularly in the south of the county, and they've worked very well to date. And as we keep reiterating, this is a temporary measure, and the long-term solution or medium to long-term solution that we will be looking to seek out, that will come forward with options to the July Cabinet meeting. We are actively pursuing that. So hopefully that will give you some comfort that we're looking at that longer term piece. In terms of the consultation piece you mentioned, Jane, I think I made an apology on that. Unfortunately, we didn't notify residents at the time the report went out. That was just an error, and I apologise for that. But I welcome the responses from residents, because those have been forwarded to me and we've been able to reflect on them, and we have done. We've read every single one of those, and we do understand the concerns, but I hope that we can mitigate those with the efforts that we're putting in. And just to mention on the final point around security, I think I covered that quite extensively in my opening remarks. I met the individuals, the security individuals on site last Friday, and they're as far from what maybe your idea of security would be. They are welcoming, they are supportive, and they act as that conduit between the individual that we place there and with the wider support services. So I have no doubt that they will be a fantastic support for the welfare of the individuals in that site, as well as giving comfort to local residents as well. I think I covered a bit there, but I'd like to bring in any officers that might be able to.
Sarah, is there any thoughts about the question on testing?
I think that's certainly something we can consider, and I'd just like to bring Mark in. I don't know whether you have any thoughts around that, Mark, because it's certainly something we have talked about in terms of testing and the concerns that have been relayed on that.
Thank you. Welcome, Mark. If you'd like to introduce yourself, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. Thanks, Sarah. I'm Mark Hand, Head of Placemaking, Housing, Highways and Flooding for the Council. We'll have to go back on some of the detail around COVID-19 testing to be sure of the circumstances. The guidance from England isn't one that I've heard of before, but I would stress that, in my opinion, there's a difference between somebody being released from a hospital into the community versus a homeless person being accommodated here. So, I mean, I'd stress that we'll be checking that the individuals we're accommodating are symptom-free before they're accommodated. If they aren't, they'll be put into isolation, the same as anybody else in our community. The accommodation does provide individual bedrooms and either an ensuite bathroom or a bathroom that will be for their sole use. And the kitchen facility would be used by one person at a time and then cleaned. And the company's already gone through how they've managed that. So there's already measures in place to ensure social distancing within the building, within the grounds of the building and the local community. The rules will be exactly the same as for you and I if we happen to live in Gilwern or wherever we are living. So we'll have a look and discuss again with the health board to see if there's anything further. But previously we've asked the question about testing people before accommodating them, and that hasn't been the case. So I'll pick that up for more detail. You have plans in place to safeguard the individuals, and by social distancing, the wider community safeguarded as well.
Thank you, Mark. Anything further, Sarah, before I bring other members in? Because I'm sure we'll invite officers back in. I know colleagues also have got questions, and visiting member Simon Harris as well. But I'll bring cabinet members in order. Can I invite Bob Greenan first, please, and then Penny Jones, and then Richard John.
Thank you, Leader. Mine's not so much a question as a comment. From my perspective, I hold also the brief for housing. And I have been keeping in touch with officers really on almost a daily basis. They've been giving both Sarah and me updates on the situation. And they have spent every available hour going around this county looking for bed and breakfasts, for hotel rooms, and using those as they become available. just remember that we have an obligation. A law is there that means that if somebody presents to us on any day as being homeless, we have to provide somewhere for them to stay that night. We have to have accommodation that is ready for us to use in emergencies. And what has been unfolding on a day-to-day basis during this crisis is that it's people who are living in houses. They have perhaps a breakdown in the family relationships, and somebody is often a youngster is chucked out of the house because the tensions in the house are too great. Or perhaps somebody has been sofa surfing in the house, and now with all the restrictions, they're no longer wanted in that house. These are the sort of people who live next door to you and me, live down the road, and they are our responsibilities when they present to us. And I'm sure that there are people out there who would all say, look, you've got to provide a home for these people rather than having them homeless in situations, especially like this during this lockdown. So we do need this accommodation in case we get to the situation where we have nowhere else to put somebody like that overnight. And the other thing I just want to say is that I know there was an issue, and it has been referred to by Sarah as well, but I'll just reiterate it. The officer who wrote the letters to go out to the residents thought that letter had gone out. Unfortunately, there was a delay in getting it out and posted. And he has put his hands up and said, look, I'm really sorry about that. He has apologized for that mistake, but it was not intended. And I hope that people can forgive what is a human error in a real emergency situation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Can I bring Penny Jones in, please?
Thank you, Peter. I'm not just what I was going to say has been said, but I'd just like to say that I support Sarah and her report. This is with my social care hat on in particular, this is a global pandemic. It's emergency rules, and Welsh Government have stipulated that all homeless must be accommodated. We have no choice in this, but we have a moral obligation to provide, as a local authority, a caring local authority, as we like to call ourselves, to provide accommodation for these homeless. And as Bob has already said, one of these groups in particular are young people whose numbers have risen dramatically recently, and they are probably short-term homeless. They just need a breathing space where they can be helped. And this is important. You know, not all, we must not target everybody with the same kind of titles of rough sleepers or whatever. It doesn't matter what they are, who they are, they should be helped. But we must realise that the term homeless encompasses many, many groups. So I would just like to say that I, for one, support the fact that we are providing another place, whether it is used or not. It is accommodation that is needed in emergency. Thank you.
Thank you, Penny. Can I bring Richard John in, please?
Thank you. Well, can I just pay tribute to Sarah and officers for just how quickly this report's been turned around in this emergency situation. Clearly, the economic consequences of coronavirus have been devastating, and our outdoor education service has not been untouched by this. And it's a fantastic facility in Gilwan, and it just seems crazy to have this accommodation lie empty when there are Monmouthshire residents who've lost their homes and need somewhere to live. And I think Penny and Bob are absolutely right. There are some really negative perceptions about homeless people, but of course they're no different to any of the rest of us. They weren't born homeless. They weren't homeless a few months ago, and hopefully we can provide that support so in a few weeks and months they can get back on their feet and will have a home of their own. But, you know, Sarah's right on this point. They're Monmouthshire residents, they're our neighbours, they're already part of our community, and we've got a responsibility to help them at a time of crisis, particularly given the economic impact of coronavirus. You know, everyone needs that basic right of a roof over their head and food. And I have to say, I was really pleased to see the supportive comments on the Abergavenny Chronicle website. It's really pleasing to see that there's so clearly very strong support for this in the wider Abergavenny community. I was also pleased to see in the report that there is a proposed end date to this. Of course, we don't know when schools will yet reopen, but I'm pleased to see that this will be available to return to use as an outdoor education centre from September, and we'll wait and see as and when that service can resume. But thank you all.
Yes, thank you, Richard. And Paul Jordan would like to come in as well.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. Much of what I wanted to say has already been said. However, whatever way you write the report, the fact of the matter is that we have both a legal and a moral responsibility to look after homeless people. Let's not get away from that. We don't know who's going to go there. There may not be anybody going there, but we all have got roofs over our heads, and these people deserve a roof over their head, albeit only until the end of August, when I'm sure Mon Life wants these premises back to conduct their outdoor activity centre. So that's all I need to say at the moment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Sarah, anything you want to pick up from those points, or I'll invite our colleagues to raise some of their questions. Okay, I'll just go to my list. Can I welcome Simon Howarth as local member? I hope Simon is online here somewhere. And Simon, thank you for putting forward your concerns. If I can invite you into perhaps if you could capture all of those in one go, that would be helpful. And I know Francis has an additional question as well, and I think Dimitri may have one also. And I'll bring them all in, and then we'll try to talk to all of them if we could. So welcome, Simon. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon, Leader, and thank you for letting me ask the questions today to Sarah. Good afternoon, Sarah. A couple of things, Sarah, and I just take note. It's something which has arisen as yesterday. I'm led to believe our housing associations, Melling, Monmouthshire Housing, actually have lots and lots of properties sitting empty at the moment because of COVID-19 and not having repairs being done, etc. I urge you to actually get a number of what they've got there at the moment lying empty. It would be valuable for us for emergencies, even if you pass the recommendations today. Number one question for me is you've deemed this development as an emergency development with the national parks, Sarah, and you've applied for this through COVID-19. If it's an emergency, we've always had an issue with homelessness in Monmouthshire. As I can remember it on the select day, it always has been an issue, and it always will be an issue. We can't get away from that. Why didn't we actually do this some time ago? And is it that other authorities have actually taken the accommodation off us, or is it that they're asking us to find even more because individuals may be coming into Monmouthshire who aren't Monmouthshire residents? That's the one question there. My second question is, you've answered that actually with the poor process of consultation. I do accept that the officer made a mistake there, and I do know the officer, and I trust him on every word he said there, so I will accept that. It didn't work out as it should have worked out, and hopefully shall learn from that. My third question is, it clearly states that this is a holding centre for individuals and will clearly be used for this as other means of support work to move individuals onto other accommodation. Surely we can find a building close to the facilities within Gwent to do this, i.e. we have centres. What about the other centre we have in Monmouth, Hillston Park? exactly the same as Team Hour, but it's not in a built-up area, in a built-up rural settlement like we have in Gilwyn here. We've got Collie Gwent sitting on our doorstep there, right next door to where we are in us there. Surely accommodation could have been found there also. So there are other areas we could have found accommodation, I believe, instead of putting it near a large rural settlement. And one of the things I did have interest in is perhaps when the children may go back to school, this centre would be ideal in the next 2 or 3 weeks, 4 weeks perhaps, to accommodate Gilwyn children and Lamfoy's children. It's set up to do that. That's what it's for. So when we want our children to go back to school, maybe in the next couple of weeks or whenever, this place would have been ideal to do that, right? And we could have looked at different avenues to accommodate. I am pleased to hear, Leader, that it's only an emergency centre and perhaps may not be used, which is good to hear, even though I don't have a lot of confidence in that. And my last question, the report states that an application for funding incurred with this emergency will sort through the Welsh Government, but it clearly states that this may not be reimbursed after a claim submitted. Has it taken the authority close to 10 weeks to decide what measure we put in place as an emergency? Again, emergency means emergency. Perhaps the Welsh Government would refuse the claim. Is that correct? Thank you, Leader.
Yeah, thanks ever so much, Simon. It's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you guys.
Okay, so
everyone.
Can I also invite Francis and Dimitri to put their questions in, and then we can sort of try to address a lot, and we can bring officers in where we need to as well. So Dimitri, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Peter. Sorry, camera problems.
No problem.
Two things just before my question. Some of the things Councillor Pratt said I found very disturbing and actually really personally offensive. Testing and putting them in PPE suits. These are human beings, so let's not forget that. The other thing is the temporary nature of this accommodation. Everyone's speaking very positively, including the cabinet member, about emergency might not be used for COVID-19. COVID-19 might drop away for the summer, but unemployment's back to double, and the economy is about to shrink at its quickest pace in a couple of 100 years. So if people think homelessness is not going to increase, I think they're delusional, and I think we're going to need this facility without a doubt. So I praise the cabinet member and I praise the officers for doing it, and they accepted where they made a mistake on the consultation. But 14% contraction in the economy, people are delusional if they think unemployment, homelessness is not going to increase. My question is, there's a lack of provision generally in terms of depth and scope in the south of the county. A lot of the south of the county is hugely dependent on Bristol. Bristol's going to suffer contraction, maybe more than others, and the south of the county really affected by that. A lot of commuters, and I know we talked about the people who might be going homeless, the people we'll never expect to go homeless because of sudden loss of income. And we're about to see the withdrawal of the furlough scheme over the next few months. We don't know when, but it's going to happen. Are we talking directly about, I don't want to use this word, but moving people from the south 40 minutes to Gilwyn, which I think is about 40 minutes from Chepstow, for example? Is that what we're actually talking about here? Are we going to shift people en masse? And that was my concern. Or are we going to try and find more accommodation in the south to accommodate people from the south? Thank you.
Thanks, Dimitri. And Francis?
Thank you. So my question really is the issue of security. I appreciate that the cabinet member has tried to elaborate on what that means. But to be fair, we had a very useful conversation with officers, understand that officers are doing their best to try and pull something forward in an emergency situation. But one of the things that this has done is effectively flushed out the fact that there's such a lot of hidden homelessness, and as Dimitri says, that's potentially going to increase. But the question was really about, if we are investing in supporting individuals as we must and will, wouldn't the money be better spent on supporting those individuals by commissioning services from, I don't know, no strong thoughts, but, Llamai, GDAS, Havel, whomsoever is appropriate to support those individuals in a tailored way to address what may be some underlying issues. But as everybody said, that anybody could be in that situation, but the key thing is to support people and also find a long-term solution. And I guess that's why we were very keen to see that support and joint work with the RSLs. Thank you.
Thanks, Francis. Okay, can I hand back to you then, Sarah, and clearly bring in your officers as you require.
Yeah, and please let me know if I've missed one of those questions. I've tried to take them in order, and I'll start with Councillor Howard. Thank you very much for your questions and some of the supportive statements that you made. In terms of the planning aspect, I think what you're saying is that that this is not a new issue in terms of homelessness, and in terms of then the permitted rights around development which allow for this to happen because it's an emergency. That might not be the case. Well, yes, as you very rightly say, homelessness has been a challenge for us for some time, but quite clearly this is a new issue because there's exasperated demand because of the current pandemic. So it's an emergency in that sense, in terms of this is focusing purely on individuals that have been displaced or have been impacted by the COVID crisis. And just to be clear on some of the development terminology, I mean, we're looking at Section 55 of the Town and Country Planning Act on this, in terms of it's about material change of use of building or land. It's not just about physically building something when we talk about development. And the amending order that came forward from Welsh Government in March, it does allow for the local authority to undertake any form of development at speed to prevent an emergency, to reduce an emergency, or to mitigate the effects of that emergency. So I think we are covered on that, and we are certainly doing the right thing in that regard. I think your second question was around use sites and whether or not we have any of the sites that we could have used more suitable. Really, I can't emphasize this enough. We have been proactive, and we are going out as much as we can through outreach to try and identify sites where we can. The officers are doing a fantastic job. You'll have seen the recent communications on this issue, but that's not the only communications by far. There have been a number of social media posts that have gone out, press notices, and as I said, we're working with partners like Welsh Government, with the RSLs and others. We're actively seeking out that accommodation. And so in terms of and just maybe picking up on some of the locations you mentioned, I mean, Coleg Gwent, for example, that's obviously not in our ownership. So planning permission, in terms of that, it would result in a delay, which is clearly not what we want. We're looking for an emergency measure to meet the current need. So just want to reassure you that we have looked as far and wide as possible, and if someone comes to us today with a reasonable size bed and breakfast in a town, of course that would be massively helpful. So I urge all members to proactively seek out any options if they may. I think there was another question. I think you mentioned the one around consultation, and we've answered that one. The other question possibly was around Welsh Government funding, and that possibly emergency means emergency, and that because we're 10 weeks in, would that then prevent us from actually accessing that funding? Well, in my mind, an emergency is not a standalone process in terms of the way it evolves and it presents new challenges, and consequently we were having to seek new solutions. And it's not to suggest that at week one we were not looking at this in great detail. Quite clearly we have put every single effort we can into finding accommodation, but the nature of the pandemic itself is displacing more and more people, and that's creating demand and bottlenecks in the system. Hopefully I've covered your points there, Councillor Howarth. Just on to Councillor Petruni, and I think just focusing around the provision in the south of the county and a lack of provision there. Well, quite clearly, as the report has stated, there's a lack of provision right across the county. We acknowledge that. We acknowledge the challenges that are being faced for us. And some of those challenges have been compounded by other decisions. So, for example, we've had to move residents, Monmouthshire citizens, out of Newport City Council properties that we previously used due to their own demands. And indeed, some of the availability of social housing through Home Search has disappeared pretty much. So there have been real challenges, as we've suggested, and that's in accommodation availability right across the county. In terms of the south, we've actually had more success, I'd suggest, in the south of the county. You know, there's been a huge number comparatively in new premises coming forward. So when I talked about those 56 new units, many of those are in the south of the county, and we continue to seek those out. And I'd welcome any suggestions that you might have in terms of any other locations, B&Bs, whatever, that might be a suitable location for us going forward. And just to talk about your suggestion around the longer term impacts, I don't think any of us are in any doubt that this is going to be hugely impactful in terms of the economic impact and the impact on individuals and families, and we will be doing all we can to support those individuals. And as I say, a report will come back in July with those wider medium to long term options for Cabinet to consider. And I've got the question from Councillor Taylor, and I think that was around about using our budget for other support services. You suggested Llanrhai, I think, and GDAS and a few others. I think what we're saying is we have that support package in place. So yes, we have got the investment in the security, which, as I say, security is much more than that. It's about welfare. But we also have that comprehensive support package in terms of having a support worker from our tenancy support service. And that service is currently with Pobl and Llanrhai. So that individual will have that support and that ongoing help. Because quite rightly, it's about supporting people to find a long-term solution through the temporary measures that we are hoping to put in place here.
Thank you, Sarah, and thanks for the way you've answered all of that. I don't think you could have been any better in trying to deal with all of those points. So thank you for that. Can I bring Penny back in, please?
Thank you. I just want to state there's a lot of emphasis on we must try and get B&Bs and of course, you know, it's suitable for some cases, but it certainly isn't suitable for a lot of young people, of younger ones. So, you know, whilst we can, there may be a short-term solution, there's certainly not a long-term solution. So I'd like people to consider that, please, when they think of homeless people being accommodated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Penny. Jane, would you like to come back in?
Thank you very much, Leader. I just first of all would like to respond to Dimitri's points, because I think he's got the wrong end of the stick. As some people are aware, I've also been supporting another homeless charity in my ward, and the reason I mentioned PPE was because I was very concerned that that other charity didn't have any PPE, and I just wanted to make sure that had been thought through. And the COVID-19 plan is something which is suggested on the Crisis charity, which is a very well respected homeless charity that does very good work. I also would like to just come back, having heard the responses from the Cabinet member, and I do think that, you know, the officer did hold his hand up and apologised to me on the Tuesday following the release of the report on the Friday. So I think, you know, his apology and the fact that it was a genuine error, I think perhaps the word I used, misled, is too strong, and I would like to withdraw that, as I do accept the explanation that has been given today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane, and thanks everybody who participated in that item, we just hope that those who may be watching in who have local concerns will take some reassurance of what has been said today. I know that's easy for some of us who may be other parts of the county to say, you might think, but we really do hope you take some reassurance from the points that the Cabinet member and officers have made. So on this report, members, we have 4 specific recommendations, and we know that Jane, as local member, has an issue with one of those. So it's important then that I go through each individual recommendation in turn. Okay, so there are 4 recommendations and I'll read them out and we will vote on each one at a time. So bear with us because this does take a bit of a longer time than what I could do in an ordinary meeting when we put our hands up. Oh, sorry, I did mean to bring the chief exec in before we've got to the voting side of things. So can I do that now and invite Chief Executive Paul Matthews?
Thank you, Leader, and I'll be very brief because I think there may well be a 5th recommendation for you to consider. Having listened to the debate, I'm really comfortable that you've got all the information that you need to have on the table to make the decision that you're about to make. The very nature of this report is that it's an emergency situation. Consequently, I think it's right that Cabinet consider suspending your usual situation whereby decisions aren't enacted for up to 10 days. To allow for a call-in situation. You will be aware that our select scrutiny process isn't currently operational, so I would suggest to you that as you consider this decision, you also accept my recommendation that the usual call-in criteria is suspended and this decision is reported to the next full council, which will be on the 4th of June.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, that makes some sense as well. So we'll have to I'll wrap that into perhaps one of the other 4 recommendations. Add it to we'll do 2.4 and we'll add that one as 2.5 and I'll take those 2 together. So I'm going to work through the first one then in 2.1 is to consider the current risk pressures and challenges relating to accommodating homeless applicants. Are you all in favour of that, please? Vote that now. I'm not sure. Oh. Right, so the first one, sorry, yeah, first one was carried, a full house, that's 8, thank you very much. Oh, hang on, so saying that again. Sorry, it doesn't seem that, no, it doesn't seem that first one worked. Is that right? I'm not seeing anything in my vote box. Okay, so oh, I'm told there's 8 votes received on that. Okay, so thank you, Nicola, for clarity. So that first one's okay. On the second one then, 2.2, that, and I'll read it out, to agree the temporary use until the 21st of August 2020 of the Blorange block at Gilwern Outdoor Education Centre for COVID-related emergency homeless accommodation and to appoint security to help supervise the building and site. Can I take votes on that one now, please? I'm assuming that's the box in place. Okay, so we have 7 in favour of that recommendation and 1 against, and clearly that is Jane Pratt. So that is still carried. 2.3 is to commission officers to prepare a further report and consider the medium and long-term options and proposals for accommodating homeless applicants. Can you vote on that one now, please? I've got 7-4. Says 1 not worked yet. If you're struggling, please put it in the chat line. Sarah, right, thank you, Sarah. Okay, well, there's a couple of you think you haven't voted, so I've now got to. I have certainly got 8 votes now, so that one is carried. Thank you, and 2.4. And can I, at this point, we're wrapping the one that Paul said now about suspending call-in. So in 2.4, the first part is to work with Welsh Local Government Association and Welsh Government to ensure that Welsh Government funding is identified to meet the costs in housing additional homeless people going forward and beyond COVID-19. And can I include the recommendation the Chief Executive made as well? So can you vote on those two recommendations, please? Okay, that's a full house. That's unanimous. So that brings us to the end of that report. Can I thank everybody for their contributions in that? And I'll move on now to the last report of the day, and that is the COVID-19 Whole Authority Safeguarding Position Statement. Councillor Penny-Jones.
Thank you, Leader. Right, throughout this COVID-19 emergency, safeguarding has been and remains business as usual. Safeguarding affects us all, and we all have a duty to be vigilant. So the purpose of this COVID-19 Whole Authority Safeguarding Position Statement is to update Cabinet on how safeguarding is being delivered through this COVID-19 period and how the Whole Authority Safeguarding Group continues to work. Julie Boothroyd, the Chief Officer for Social Care, Health and Safeguarding, will comment on the statement, and I will address Councillor Petruni's question afterwards, and other questions can be taken if they wish. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Penny. And Julie, can I invite you in and thank you for bringing this report to us today, and let you and talk us through it. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, thank you, Penny, as well for the introduction. Just wanted to really have the opportunity to assure members of the work that is going on, Cabinet members, the work that is going on in the background around safeguarding. Quite early on, we decided that we needed to have a little overview of the Whole Authority Safeguarding Policy, and hence the position statement is in effect that. So we've taken all the cornerstones of the safeguarding policy and had a bit of a read over, if you like, in terms of how can we continue to provide safeguarding from a whole authority perspective during these times. So Cabinet members will see that the position statement at Appendix 1, this doesn't replace the safeguarding whole authority policy that is in place. This is our, if you like, our working document whilst we're in these extreme times. And at Appendix 2 is the risk register, which is very much a dynamic risk register that we will be looking at on an ongoing basis and updating and amending as we go forward. Obviously, safeguarding remains an essential part of what we do, and in lots of ways, both I'm just going to speak from a social services point of view. From an adults and a children's safeguarding point of view, it is very much business as usual. Our numbers have not abated. What we are having to do is find different ways of addressing how we get close to people to be able to carry out, if you like, the safeguarding responsibility. How that extends to the rest of the authority is very important, and we're going to be stepping back up the whole authority safeguarding group work, but very much through that COVID lens as it stands at the moment, and making sure that we've got the right approaches in place. A lot of work has been carried out in terms of putting our training on a digital platform so that actually people can access that as they would in normal circumstances. And I think it's very important that we recognise that the wider networks that are now in place through the community development angle, we've been able to actually extend our safeguarding responsibility and more of that safeguarding eyes and ears across a much wider group of people. So our initial concerns, which are still concerns, but our initial concerns, which is we're not going to have eyes on, have abated somewhat, because actually we've got eyes on, but through different people. And we're hoping that over the course of time that actually we're going to be able to, in a sense, skill up a wider section of our community to be able to be those eyes on, if you like, other than just the professionals that we've relied on in the past. So I'm hoping that members will find that this is a useful update, and that actually what I'm planning to do is to bring in on a reasonably frequent basis some further updates as we begin to implement this, and I'm happy to take any questions.
So thanks, Julie. It really is appreciated having an update at this time, because so many of us are anxious about what might be happening out in the wider community, and you know, and a big thanks for all of the teams for the work they're doing. It's just such a different situation to that we normally deal with, and it's required people to go above and beyond, and so a big thanks for that. So can anybody wish to come in at this point and ask anything on the report? Penny would like to come back?
Yeah. Yes, please.
Please, yeah.
Sorry. Councillor Petroni asked a question. Could I just address that, and then if there's any backup from Julie? He asked where and when.
I'll invite Dimitri to ask his question, actually,
yeah.
Penny,
Good.
if that's okay.
Okay.
So perhaps then I'll do that. Dimitri, would you like to come in and put your question? Okay.
Yeah, it was support the report, but I was just querying about when and where we're going to draw the line between relying on volunteers and restarting normal council provision vis-a-vis kind of encompassed within the safeguarding issue. Yeah, just simple as that, basically.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll let perhaps Julie answer. I think we a couple of us may have a view on that. And Penny, I'll let you come back in then after Julie.
Okay. Thank you, Dimitri. I think it's a really important point that you raise. And I think I'd just go back on something I said, which we are business as usual. So we're not relying on other people, but actually what this opportunity in some ways is affording us is wider awareness raising through that volunteer network of people being able to understand that actually, as well as supporting people, there may be issues that people identify, and actually them knowing what to do with that is actually quite an important sort of wider community safeguarding issue. So I don't see us as relying on those volunteers. I see it as a sort of complementary supplement at the moment that is actually proving to be very, very, very useful. And I think what we've got to do is look at how we enable that to continue in terms of a bit like the public consciousness around safeguarding in its widest sense. And I don't think any of us expected that to be a consequence of this. And in some ways, it can be a positive consequence. So I don't see it as a dependency or a reliability. We're running business as usual. We'll continue to do that. But there is some extra, if you like, eyes on and supplementary support that is being derived from what are very unusual circumstances.
Thanks, Julie. That was really, really helpful. Penny, do you want to come back in as well?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that says it all really. But we're and just to reiterate, we're not drawing a line over this. A large number of people are supporting those who are shielded, and that will continue for now. And it's along the lines of our own place-based working system. So, you know, it's a continuation. There was a tremendous response in relation to the volunteers, and it's something that we can be proud of. It can be seen as part of our resilient community initiative, really, and we want to encourage it. And one of the positives, as Julie has said, of this dreadful emergency is that the community spirit has shown through, and that's what we've got to encourage. So no, it's not having a line drawn under it. It will be encouraged. Thank you.
No, thank you, Penny. One of the things we're blessed in Monmouthshire is, you know, we use this terminology, social capital, don't we? But it's just good people. You know, the county's full of good people who just want to be involved, and we've seen that in spades over this pandemic. And you know, our partnership teams have been doing some great work, liaising with all those individuals, and it's just an opportunity. I think. Well, thanks, Dimitri, for giving the platform to raise that question. That the point that we just want to share our big thanks to that fantastic effort, which isn't finished, not a long way off from being finished. And we hope we can keep those people really close to us as an organisation going forward, because it's just a fantastic asset. So just from me as leader, a big thanks for our volunteer effort. It's been brilliant. Anybody got any final points they want to add to this final report? No? Okay, well, thanks again, Julie. I'll take us to the recommendations then. I'll just read them out. So recommendations in 2.1, that Cabinet approves the safeguarding update report, including the safeguarding position statement at Appendix 1 and the risk matrix at Appendix 2. Can you all vote for that now, please? Yeah, and that's everybody. So thank you. That's unanimous. So thank you very much. And I think that brings us to the end of the Cabinet meeting today. Can I thank everybody who has been involved? Can I thank everybody who watched in and who will possibly, because this will be no doubt on YouTube. And I look forward to our next Cabinet meeting. I'm not quite sure the date of that yet. And in the meantime, can I wish you all well and ask you to stay safe. And thank you. Bye for now.